June, do you want me to stop the recording on my end as well?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Okay, it looks like it's okay. It looks like it's loading, and we are live. Okay, June, you're
Okay,
live.
great.
Give me a second. Switch over to man.
June, do you want me to stop the recording on my end as well?
Okay, I'm admitting everyone now.
All right.
It looks like it's loading, and we are live.
Okay, great.
So just briefly, hi everybody, this is Renee. It sounds like we are getting a little bit of sound from the YouTube channel, possibly. I don't know who's streaming on YouTube, but I'm not hearing it as much now.
Okay, I think we should get started. It's 2 minutes past 9:30. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our workshop for consideration of extending final implementation deadlines for certain TMDLs. Kenny, if you can load the slides, please, that'd be great.
Okay, sure. Wait a minute.
Okay. So when Kenny's doing that, I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Junju, Chief of the TMDL non-point source. And I also would like to welcome our regional board members. I think we have Vice Chair E with us today here, and board member Stahl as well. Thank you for joining us today. Did I miss any other board members in the audience?
I don't see any others on the
Okay.
list.
Great. Right. Thank you, LB. So also here with us today are our Executive Officer, Renee Purdy, our Assistant Executive Officer, Jenny Newman, Chief of the Regional Program Section, Dr. LB Nye, and several TMDL staff, including Dr. Celine Galong, Dr. Kenny Wong, and Man Wu. They actually will be helping us during this workshop. So thank you for your help. Okay, next slide, please, Kenny. All right, so we would like to know who's joining us here today. And for that, I'll go ahead and launch a poll question. A poll window will show up on your screen and you can respond accordingly. So please go ahead and respond to the poll. Man, if you can launch the poll, please. And I'll give everyone a minute to respond. Okay, the polls are coming in. Okay. We're almost done here. All right, I'm going to end the poll now and share the results. Okay. Oop. Share results, sorry. All right, so as we can see, we've got permittees, we've got NGOs, consultants, water board representatives, and other representatives. Okay, a good range of people. Thank you again for joining us today. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing the results now. Okay, welcome again. All right, let's move on to the next slide, please. Okay, in this slide, I'll go over the meeting agenda with you. Okay, so first, we already begun with our introductions, and then I'll go over the Zoom instructions in the next couple of slides. And then around 9:45, we will start with our presentation to give you an overview of the TMDL extension project. Dr. L.B. Nye, the Chief of the Regional Program Section, will be giving this presentation, followed by a question and answer session. And at 10:30, we plan to have a 10-minute break. And then we'll start again with our question and answer session at 10:40. Around 11:25, we'll be talking about next steps and wrap up the meeting around 11:30. Kenny, next slide, please. Okay, so now I'll go over some Zoom instructions. The workshop is being recorded via Zoom, and it's also live streamed on YouTube. Your responses to the poll questions were recorded as well. But if you're experiencing any technical difficulties, it's best to actually leave the meeting and join again. However, if you're still having the same issues, please email Javier Gonzalez at javier.gonzalez@waterboards.ca.gov. His email is actually on the slide right now, and I'll give you a minute to write it down as needed. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, now this slide actually shows a picture of the Zoom control bar, which is the black bar at the bottom of the screen. Once you click on participants, which is on the lower right corner, a new window will open up and show the list of the participants. Here you can raise your hand or change your screen name. We want to make sure that we call you by your proper name, and therefore we wanted to request that you rename yourself to display your full name if it is not already displayed. Next to your full name, click on, next to your name, click on More, and then rename to do so. Please use raise hand function if you wish to speak, and unmute yourself when you are called on to speak. I will give you another minute to practice these functions and rename yourself if needed. Okay, I can see a lot of people showing full names, which is great, okay. Okay. Great. Okay, now I'm going to hand it over to LB, and she will give you an overview of the TMDL extension project.
First, I need to unmute myself. Good morning, everyone. As June said, my name is LB Nye. I'm the section chief of the regional program section. This is actually our first staff workshop for the TMDL section, so we're pretty excited, and we just all want to thank you for coming, and welcome to our two board members and board member Stahl and Vice Chair Yee. Our objectives for today are to discuss the proposed TMDL extension deadlines, why staff are making these proposals, and to answer questions and hear stakeholder comments and concerns. We'll focus on the proposed changes to the basin plan and on your comments on those. And we won't discuss other specific MS4 issues today. We do have board members present today, and we did not notice this meeting as including discussion of the MS4 permit, which is a pending item before the board. So we want to stay focused on the TMDL extensions as discussed in the staff report. I will say the one thing outside the staff report that I would welcome hearing some comments from people about is other TMDLs that they think that should be considered for an extension, a basin plan amendment extension. Just to help us out in our internal discussions as we try to decide if there are other TMDLs that should be considered, and if so, in what order we should be looking at these. I'm not prepared today to present any recommendations or point of view from staff, but I would be glad to hear at least a little bit of feedback on what you think our TMDL extension priorities should be. So next slide, Kenny. So as I just said, although I just said we won't be discussing other aspects of the MS4 permit today, the MS4 permit is the reason we developed these recommendations. A significant concern for many MS4 permittees, as discussed in the staff report, are the upcoming deadlines for certain TMDLs included in the MS4 permit, especially those deadlines that are coming up in 2021 and 2023. And this slide here that we're looking at now was part of the staff presentation to the board during the June board meeting this year. This is how we told the board that how we would be addressing that permittee concern. And this is in fact the plan we followed to develop these recommendations. We based the extensions on the criteria that are listed here, and I'll go over the criteria in more detail in the next couple of slides. And we explained how the new deadlines could be incorporated into a new MS4 permit, even if the basin plan changes had not yet received final approvals from State Board and Office of Administrative Law. And I think most of you will remember that changes to the basin plan, once adopted by our board, still require approval from the State Board at a State Board meeting and approval by the California Office of Administrative Law. Most basin plan amendments, like changes to standards or any of the essential elements of a TMDL, also require approval from EPA. But because these proposed changes are limited to changes to implementation schedules, we won't require EPA approval for them to be final. And once any changes are adopted by our board, we can include two sets of deadlines in the proposed MS4 permit that our board will consider. The deadlines based on the existing TMDL deadlines that apply when the permit is adopted, and the extended deadlines that will come into effect when the basin plan amendments become final. And that will ensure that permittees will automatically be subject to the extended deadlines without having to reopen the MS4 permit. Can I have the next slide? The focus of the staff analysis and the proposals were the TMDLs with approaching final deadlines in the next 1 to 3 years. TMDLs with final implementation dates further out, such as the San Gabriel River Metals and Selenium TMDL and the Los Cerritos Channels Metals TMDL, which both have final implementation dates in 2026, for example, were not considered at this time. Additionally, we did not evaluate extensions for dry weather-related TMDL deadlines. An extension of dry weather-related deadlines is not warranted because the prohibition on non-stormwater discharges has been in place in MS4 permits since the 1990s. And permittees have had success complying with or are approaching compliance with most dry weather deadlines. And we did not evaluate extensions of interim implementation deadlines. There are very few upcoming interim implementation deadlines related to wet weather waste load allocations assigned to MS4 discharges. Most of these interim deadlines have already passed. And we also did not consider at this time extensions for TMDLs where the final implementation date has passed, such as the Kitty and Hobie Beach bacteria TMDL in Ventura County and the Machado Lake Toxics and Nutrients TMDL. These deadlines have already passed, so they're not imminent, and the full implementation period for these TMDLs did not include impacts to COVID-19. Can I have the next slide, Kenny? So these are the criteria that we use to evaluate the priority TMDLs as we discussed with our board last June. For each TMDL, staff has evaluated TMDL specific factors to determine whether changes to TMDL implementation schedule may be justified. First, water quality status and whether water quality improvement is still needed. And also we considered the urgency of addressing ongoing negative impacts to beneficial uses, such as recreational uses and aquatic life. Second, whether meaningful implementation progress has been made by the responsible permittees. So if permittees have implemented projects, and staff's analysis focused on projects that would directly improve water quality. And also if permittees have begun planning and design of projects that'll continue to make improvements in water quality. And also we made estimates of how much time the remaining required actions may take in a particular watershed. In some cases, we also considered other watershed specific factors, such as the size of the watershed in the case of Marina del Rey, and the impacts of the Woolsey fire in the case of Malibu Creek and the northern Santa Monica Bay. Finally, for TMDLs in the same watershed, we proposed alignment of final TMDL deadlines in some cases, so that the watershed management programs for those watersheds can be structured to address all of the TMDLs at the same time and to simplify reporting. And then we considered the economic impact of COVID-19 pandemic and all of the subject implementation programs. Next slide, Kenny. So in order to examine the question of whether meaningful progress has been made in the implementation of a TMDLs in terms of completed projects, we looked for projects identified in watershed management programs, enhanced watershed management programs, stormwater investment plans, and in the case of Ventura County as identified in TMDL implementation plans or the stormwater resource plan developed by Ventura County MS4 permittees. We also reviewed MS4 permittee annual reports and MS4 permittee presentations to the board about implementation progress. For water quality progress, we used the analyses in the MS4 monitoring data report, which the board has released this year. We've released 2/3, two of 3 parts of that monitoring report, and including the watersheds that we're discussing today. So from these documents, staff considered completed projects, current project commitments, MS4 permittee input on the time it takes to implement a project from design to completion, available planning level cost estimates, and the amount of dedicated funding. So next slide. We also considered the potential impact to completion of TMDL projects by the economic impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. Staff considered tax revenue impact, vaccine or improved treatment deployment, and the time estimated for economic recovery as estimated by economists. It's unclear how many people may be unable to pay their taxes, but it can be expected that local governments, including the 2 counties, will at least receive the majority of property tax revenues, which is what funds the Safe Clean Water program and other stormwater measures. In fact, at a presentation at the board meeting last week, Matt Frary of the LA County Flood Control District said the Safe Clean Water program took in about $280 million in revenue last year, and they are expecting about as much next year. And they were also able to leverage an additional approximately $340 million from other sources. So in this assessment, we estimated it would be about 3 years for a sufficient economic recovery. Each of these considerations, though, has a degree of uncertainty. For example, the estimates for a full vaccine deployment change pretty frequently as vaccines are developed and approved. So while during any long implementation period, and in the case of these TMDLs, the implementation periods are 10 to 21 years, one would expect periods of economic downturn. This downturn, however, the COVID-related downturn, comes at a critical juncture for TMDLs with the imminent final deadlines. To ensure the ability of permittees subject to these imminent final deadlines to be able to manage the additional fiscal challenge to their ability to build the remaining projects necessary to meet the TMDL deadlines, staff recommend that 3 years be added to the final deadlines for the wet weather TMDLs. All the dischargers subject to TMDLs will experience the fiscal effects of COVID. However, there is time for the deadlines which are further in the future to be adjusted at a later time, if necessary, to the degree appropriate. We also note that investing in stormwater infrastructure will provide a crucial economic stimulus as well as improve water quality. Next slide. So these are the TMDLs that staff have analyzed, and in most cases developed basin plan amendments. with extended implementation final deadlines for our board to consider. We examined 9 TMDLs and made recommendations to extend 7. And I'm going to go over these watershed by watershed in the next few slides. So next slide. This is Bionic Creek. In the Bionic Creek watershed, there are 3 TMDLs with approaching deadlines. Each became effective in 2006 or 2007, so in effect 14 or 15 years ago. And even though these TMDLs have been in place for a long time, for each, water quality still needs to improve significantly. Bacteria in the creek and estuary still exceed allowable exceedance days of single sample bacteria standards about half the time. And the geometric mean standard is exceeded most of the time. For toxics in the estuary, toxic pollutants still frequently exceed water quality standards, and also concentrations of metals still frequently exceed water quality standards. Now, since the TMDL became effective, and the TMDLs became effective and were incorporated in the 2012 LA County MS4 permit, permittees have made progress in planning and design, but have implemented relatively few structural control measures. From a stormwater volume standpoint, permittees have implemented or nearly implemented 6.6% of the required BMP capacity outlined in their enhanced watershed management program to achieve the TMDLs. So with 6.6%, we see there is a need for additional time to achieve the TMDLs. We also see that limited progress has been made. Based on the original implementation schedules, the status of water quality, the pace of implementation to date, the fiscal impacts of COVID-19, a 5-year TMDL deadline extension is recommended for each of these TMDLs. 5 years is an appropriate extension, given that the original schedules were 14 or 15 years long, and the need to return the water to meeting beneficial uses. For the remaining projects needed, given the fact that the Bionic Creek Watershed Group has spent significant time on design and planning of the projects to attain the TMDL, we expect that permittees can complete these projects in 3 or 4 years per project. If the projects are strategically spread out through the watershed, it's possible to complete the remaining projects needed to achieve the TMDL within the 5-year extension, augmented with additional time if needed through a time schedule order. A time schedule order, or TSO, is a regulatory tool exactly designed for a situation where a permittee with, under an NPDES permit has a specific project or set of projects planned, which are necessary to be able to achieve a requirement. TSOs will be a useful tool when necessary as permittees get closer to compliance. We do note that the Bionic Creek Watershed Management Group will not be able to rely solely on Safe Clean Water Program to fund these projects, but the extension allows time to pursue additional sources of funding. The 5-year extension is consistent with federal guidance that TMDLs be attained in a reasonable period of time, while allowing permittees time to accrue the Safe Clean Water Program funding and pursue additional funding. And you'll note at the bottom there, only a 1-year extension is recommended for the PCB waste load allocations in the toxics TMDL. That's because MS4 permittees already had a 4-year extension to achieve those PCB waste load allocations until 2025. And then staff recommended a 1-year extension to align the final dates of the Bionic Creek TMDLs. And the next slide. In Marina Del Rey, there are two TMDLs with impending deadlines. The bacteria TMDL became effective in 2004, and the toxics TMDL became effective in 2006. When the toxics TMDL was reconsidered in 2014, the implementation schedule was revised to add an additional 2 years to the deadline for the back basins, and then to include a deadline for the front basins of March 2022, 2021. In water quality, bacterial water quality usually fails to meet the allowable number of exceedance days of the single sample bacteria standards and often exceeds the geometric mean standards. Improvement in water quality is still needed for toxics. Copper, lead, zinc, PCBs exceed the sediment targets 100% of the time. Since the TMDL became effective and was incorporated into the MS4 permit, Permittees have made progress in planning and design, but most permittees have implemented relatively few structural control measures. From a stormwater volume standpoint, permittees have implemented or nearly implemented 2.7% of the required BMP capacity outlined in their watershed management program to achieve the TMDL. Permittees in the Marina Del Rey watershed have made a good faith effort in the design and planning of control measures to comply with the TMDL, but they have not implemented a sufficient number of projects. Well, the fact that only a 2.7% of the required BMP capacity has been implemented indicates the need for additional time to achieve the TMDL. It also illustrates that limited progress has been made to achieve the TMDL since they became effective. Other projects that were not included in the Enhanced Watershed Management Program, such as the Oxford Basin Multi-Use Enhancement Project, will contribute to TMDL compliance, but those contributions have not yet been quantified. And staff also considered the fact that the Marina Del Rey watershed is only 2.9 square miles. It'd be inconsistent with US EPA guidance that implementation plans be sufficient to achieve the waste load allocation in a reasonable period of time to allow for a lengthy additional implementation schedule to address runoff from a 2.9 square mile area, especially since the permittees have already had time to do so. So based on the TMDL and watershed specific factors, including the original implementation schedule, the status of water quality, the pace of implementation to date, the unquantified benefits of the Oxford Basin project, and the small size of the watershed, staff do not recommend an extension. However, based on the fiscal impacts of COVID-19, a 3-year TMDL extension is recommended. Permittees also have the option to request a TSO. A TSO can be issued for up to 5 years. And also permittees can request an additional TSO for an additional 5 years if certain conditions are met, if they need additional time to complete projects to achieve TMDL compliance. Can I have the next slide? So, thank you. There are 3 TMDLs in Malibu Creek with impending deadlines. The bacteria TMDL was adopted in 2006, and 2 of the TMDLs, the nutrient and sediments TMDLs, were established by US EPA in 2003 and 2013. US EPA established TMDLs do not include implementation schedules. So the Los Angeles Water Board later adopted an implementation plan with implementation deadlines for those 2 TMDLs and incorporated into the basin plan, and that became effective in 2017. So the Malibu watershed is both in Los Angeles and Ventura counties, and there are also 3 separate watershed groups in Malibu Creek, the North Santa Monica Bay Enhanced Watershed Management Program, the Malibu Creek Enhanced Watershed Management Program, and the Ventura County Stormwater Resource Plan. For bacteria, water quality still needs to improve. Concentrations of bacteria in wet weather and Malibu Creek watershed still frequently exceed water quality standards. Analysis by the North Santa Monica Bay Enhanced Watershed Management Program in their reasonable assurance analysis showed that no additional control measures are required to achieve the TMDL, and thus no additional time is necessary in the North Santa Monica Bay Enhanced Watershed Management Program portion of the watershed. In the rest of the watershed, the Malibu Creek Enhanced Watershed Management Program group and the Ventura County jurisdictions have implemented 6 structural BMPs and almost completed another one. From a stormwater volume standpoint, permittees have implemented or nearly implemented 2.6% of the required BMP capacity, as outlined in the Malibu Creek Enhanced Watershed Management Program. Also, the permittees in Ventura County have implemented 1 out of 3 projects identified in their implementation plan to achieve the TMDL. The permittees have made a good faith effort toward the design and planning of control measures to comply with the TMDL, but they have not implemented a sufficient number of projects to achieve the TMDL. While the fact that the only 2.6% of the required BMP capacity in the Malibu Creek Enhanced Watershed Management Program and 1 out of 3 projects in Ventura County have been implemented indicates the need for additional time to achieve the TMDL, but it also illustrates that limited progress has been made since the TMDL became effective nearly 15 years ago. So based on the original implementation schedule of the bacteria TMDL, the status of water quality, the pace of implementation, along with the considerations of the impacts of the Woolsey fire and the fiscal impacts of COVID-19, a 5-year TMDL deadline extension is recommended for the bacteria TMDL. And this applies to the whole watershed, including Los Angeles and Ventura counties. 5 years is an appropriate extension, given the fact that the original schedule was over 15.5 years long, and that brings the implementation schedule to over 20 years to address a pollutant that threatens public health. Given the fact that the Malibu Creek Enhanced Watershed Management Program group and the Ventura County group have spent significant time on the design and planning of projects to attain the TMDL, if the projects are spread out strategically through the watershed and over time, it's possible to complete the remaining projects needed to achieve the TMDL within a 5-year extension, plus additional time through TSOs if appropriate. We note that the Malibu Creek Enhanced Watershed Management Program will not be able to rely solely on Safe Clean Water Program to fund these projects, and Ventura County permittees will not be able to rely solely on revenues from its benefit assessment program. But the extension allows time to pursue additional sources of funding to complete the projects for the bacteria TMDL. Now for nutrients, the nutrient TMDLs, concentration of nutrients in Malibu Creek still exceed water quality standards in the summer, which is the dry weather condition, but they attain water quality standards in the winter. And as I said before, extensions for dry weather related TMDL deadlines are not warranted because the prohibition on non-stormwater discharges has been MS4 permit since the 1990s. The exceedances of water quality standards for nutrients in the summer are dry weather related exceedances. So an extension of the TMDL is not warranted for summer wastewater locations. And because the winter standards are being met, it's not needed for winter wasteload allocations. So staff has proposed no extensions for the nutrient TMDL in Malibu. Can I have the next slide? So our final watershed is Santa Monica Bay. In Santa Monica Bay, there's one TMDL with an impending deadline for bacteria. Santa Monica Bay is a little more complicated because there are 6 groups implementing under the MS4 permit and 66 beaches or monitoring sites. And some of the beaches are anti-degradation beaches, meaning that they're held to a standard of good water quality that was in place at the time the TMDL was adopted. Bacterial water quality still needs to improve at the Santa Monica Bay beaches. In wet weather, while many sites had fewer than the allowable number of exceedance days, about 1/3 consistently exceeded the allowable number of exceedance days. For geometric means, about 20 of the beaches frequently exceeded the geometric mean limit. Since the TMDL became effective and was incorporated into the MS4 permit, permittees have made varying degrees of progress in planning and design, but have not implemented a sufficient number of structural control measures to achieve the TMDL. The North Santa Monica Bay Coastal Watersheds Group has implemented 49% of their projects. Jurisdictional groups 2 and 3 have implemented 12% of their projects, and the Beach Cities Group have implemented 18.7% of their projects. Well, the fact that only a small to relatively moderate percentage of the required BMPs have been implemented indicates the need for additional time to achieve the TMDL. It also illustrates the somewhat limited progress has been made to achieve the TMDL since it became effective over 17 years ago. So based on the original implementation schedule, the status of water quality, the pace of implementation to date, the number of projects that remain to be implemented, and the fiscal impacts of COVID, a 3-year TMDL deadline extension is recommended for the North Santa Monica Bay Coastal Watersheds Group. A 5-year extension is recommended, I want to get this right. I'm sorry. A 3-year TMDL deadline extension is recommended for North Santa Monica Bay Coastal Watersheds Group. A 5-year TMDL deadline is recommended for jurisdictional groups 2 and 3, and a 3-year TMDL deadline is recommended for the beaches and the Beaches Cities Group that are not subject to the TMDL's anti-degradation provisions, that is, that are not the anti-degradation beaches. No extension is recommended for beaches subject to the TMDL's anti-degradation provisions or for Palos Verdes, Rolling Hills, or Jurisdictional Group 7, since no projects remain to be implemented in those areas. So last slide, please, Kenny. So these are the staff recommendations you'll find detailed in the staff report. Based on the comments we receive, we may modify or revise or make additions to the staff report and basin plan amendments as we bring them before the board in February. These final dates I want you to remember that the final dates in the basin plan amendments can be further modified under the NPDS permit, the MS4 permit, with TSOs as necessary and justified. And then based on request, feedback, and comments and board direction, staff may later look at schedules for other TMDLs. The deadline for comments is January 11th, 2021. We noticed the deadline is January 4th, 2021, but we've received a couple of requests to extend the deadline, so we extended it by 1 week. We very much intend to bring this before the board in February so that we're able to include any new dates in a tentative MS4 permit that the board will be able to consider for adoption. And we don't want to delay the board meeting by extending the comment period too much, but we did agree that it makes sense to pull the due date a little further away from the holiday week. So you should see a notice officially extending the deadline today or very soon. And also, I want to say, we can meet with any of you or any group before or after the comment deadline for further or more focused discussions. So that's the end of my prepared remarks. I think Man Voon is going to manage or moderate our question and answer session. Yes, take it over, Man.
Hi, everybody. This is Man Voon. We will now start our question and answer session for questions on the proposed TMDL extension project. Please focus your questions and comments on the topic of today's workshop. Please go ahead and raise your hands, and we'll be taking questions in the order that we receive them. And I will call your name when it is your turn to speak. First of all, I'd like to apologize first if I mispronunciate your name. And at that point, we would ask you to unmute yourselves and share your webcam if you like. Prior to asking your question, we would also like you to please state your name and the organization that you're representing. Thank you. Okay, so receiving questions now, and it seems like the first person is Ewelina Murkowska. So I'd like to ask you to unmute your mic and please ask your question.
Good morning. My name is Ewelina Mutkowska. I'm Senior Stormwater Manager at Ventura County Public Works Watershed Protection. Today, I'm representing Ventura County TMDL responsible agencies. Thank you so much for all your efforts preparing and releasing the Basin Plan Amendment. Thank you for all the review of TMDLs and deadlines and all your analysis. We also appreciate you listening to us and reading through our submitted comment letters. And thank you for an extension that 1 week will give us some flexibility to submit additional comments to the proposed Basin Plan Amendment. So we really appreciate your efforts and your help in this process. Since we started discussing the renewal of MS4 permit in sometime in 2016, we brought up our concerns with the past due and fast approaching bacteria wet weather TMDL implementation deadlines on many occasions. And as I mentioned during the last week board meeting in 2019, the Regional Water Board and our directors of public works discussed permit renewal and specifically issues of infeasibility and unaffordability to comply with bacteria wet weather deadlines. The board members indicated they would look into providing more time to address wet weather bacteria TMDLs. Based on this meeting, the Ventura permittees had expected consideration of bacteria wet weather TMDLs in the proposed basin plan amendment. In August 2020, Ventura MS4 permittees submitted a letter requesting consideration of several TMDL schedule modifications. The proposed basin plan amendment, as we just heard in LB's presentation, only included Malibu Creek bacteria TMDL with proposed extension of 5 years. We appreciate this consideration. However, please be aware that 5 years is not long enough. It needs to be at least 10 years. Why? Because wet weather bacteria is extremely challenging and costly to address. In Ventura County, the wet weather bacteria is a driving factor in high costs of compliance, high costs for both design, construction, and long-term maintenance. We can't make those CIP decisions lightly. We need to evaluate alternative approaches based on the latest science and to incorporate the tools that were not available for Ventura County since just last year, 2019, when the long-awaited statewide bacteria provisions became effective. So only since last year, additional compliance tools like use attainability analysis, natural source exclusion became available for Ventura County permittees. Also, driven by recent water conservation efforts, only recently the sewer collection system operators in Upper Malibu Creek became open to the idea of stormwater diversion for treatment and recycling. Few years ago, it was not an option for county unincorporated areas. For capital improvement projects, time is needed to allow sufficient time to secure funding, develop project concepts, complete CEQA, planning, design, construction, and implementation. We also need to complete pending assessments. So at least 10 additional years is needed for meaningful and effective progress. Even if we had funding, we would not be able to complete necessary projects within the proposed 5 years. And just a couple comments on issues brought up by LB during her presentation. LB mentioned our benefit assessment. So I would like to remind you that in Malibu area, county unincorporated, we get $0 from benefit assessment. So it's all funded by general fund. And as far as the nutrient TMDL and the determination that no extension is needed, I mean, if we work on potential diversion of low flows of stormwater into the sewer collection systems, we will be also addressing the elevated nitrogen and phosphorus concentrations in the water. So it will be hopefully one multi-benefit project or a number of projects, but one type of diversion type of project that will take care of compliance of both TMDLs. And the second issue that LB mentioned in her presentation is
Paulina?
Yes?
I'm sorry to interrupt. Do we want to take these questions one by one, or do you want to just list them all out and then have us have the discussion all at once? How long or how many more questions do you have?
So I have one extended question, and that's regarding the Kitty Beach and Hobby Beach bacteria TMDL.
But you also talked about the bacteria provisions and how they might apply to this effort. The length of the schedule for Malibu bacteria extension. So we'll do those. And then the next one you're going to is more like a lengthy, you're gonna drop, like you're gonna expand on the Kitty Beach and Hobie Beach? Yes. I wanna make sure I'm writing them all down.
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
So you want me to proceed now, or are we gonna take a look at the Malibu Creek extension comments?
Okay, so the first one was mainly about Malibu Creek extension, and you were bringing in the discussion on the bacteria provision. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, no, that's okay. I think if we just note that, you could go on to Kitty and Hobie Beach. I just wanted to make sure I was getting them down right. Okay.
All right, it's a lot of information. At least there's more than 3 minutes. Yes, so our second issue is that proposed basin plan amendment does not include Channel Islands Harbor, Kitty, and Hobby Beaches bacteria TMDL. I really appreciate LB acknowledging our request. We've been discussing it, and I brought this up last week at the Regional Water Board meeting. Ventura County requested consideration of an extension for this TMDL, but it was not granted. Why more time is needed? During TMDL development back in 2007, the county brought up several concerns regarding this TMDL, including natural sources of bacteria. The TMDL agencies have done significant work to address dry weather. We are diverting low flows year-round to sewer collection system, which was main source of urban flow to the beach. Ongoing weekly inspections of other storm drain for any evidence of flows during dry weather has been done. So far, completed human marker testing and special studies pointed out potential leaking sewer lines near the beaches, which local sewer district has repaired to some extent. Now, Kitty and Hobby Beaches have high ratings, A's, during dry weather per Hilda Bay report card. As planned in wet weather implementation plan, the TMDL agencies have been implementing stormwater retention and treatment BMPs for new development and redevelopment projects. However, the treatment options are limited, especially for bacteria. For example, nature-based BMPs fail unless appropriate coastal plants are selected and established. Very site-specific. We have done multiple replanting attempts on the coastal BMPs before bioswales and vegetation-based BMPs became functional, but still not effective for wet weather bacteria TMDL. During wet weather, we have been conducting a number of studies to figure out what needs to be done to reduce bacteria levels in stormwater. Initial studies were inconclusive. We were not able to find a source of elevated bacteria levels. Currently, we've been doing a special studies with Southern California Coastal Water Research Project, focus of human markers and chemical sewer indicators to try to target activities that will best protect human health, but it is going to take time to complete. We need to do studies to find source because the only effective long-term option is to address the source. Similar to other coastal neighborhoods, community by Kitty and Hobby Beaches are densely developed with small parcels. We do not offer any room even for a rain barrel, not to mention regional projects or green streets that are not an option. 2 months ago, in October 2020, the local sewer district completed rehabilitation of the sewer system determined to be high risk of failing, adjacent to the beaches. Now, the TMDL agencies need to do additional monitoring to see if that helped address the problem. Any future additional rehabilitation of sewer system will need firm evidence and time to complete. TMDL agencies are collaborating with SQUIRP on a study to help identify if more work is needed. Also,
okay, Evelina, I'm going to interrupt you again just because we have a lot of participants and it looks like a lot of hands are going up.
Great.
And it sounds like you're providing a lot of good justification for why we should consider extending this project to Kitty Beach and Hobie Beach.
I'm glad to hear that. Thank you.
Okay. Okay.
I have just one more to mention that the drainage area to the harbor is about 7,600 acres total, and about 30% are non-MS4 permittees. That's the last one.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. Was really. Why don't we start with Kitty and Hobie then? That's the one you ended with. I know we've discussed Kitty and Hobie before, and I know we have a meeting scheduled on January 5th, so that we can really get into all of the data that you were just discussing and all the issues that you were discussing, so that our staff can better understand and fully understand really the challenges that you're facing. So I think that's probably the first thing we should do about Kitty and Hobie is really come to an understanding of a full understanding of the situation you have there and the data that you've been collecting. And then I think from that point, as I said, we'll be talking to lots of stakeholders and with our board about our next steps in terms of further extensions. Do we want to look at expired, past due, I should say, not expired, past due deadlines and extend some of those? So, thank you for discussing that for us today. That is something that we're looking at. In terms of the 5 years is not enough in Malibu, we recognize that 5 years may not be enough all on its own, and that's why I made a point several times to talk about the TSOs. And TSOs, the time schedule orders, can add 5 years and can add 10 years to a schedule. If it's a TSO has to be applied for, it has to be appropriate, it has to be justified, and so forth. It's not automatic, but it is a really useful tool for when it's appropriate, adding years to achieving a certain number of projects to achieve a requirement under an MS4 permit, an MPDS permit, really. So I think when you're thinking about the number of years that you may have to accomplish to complete a TMDL, you may want to incorporate that into your thinking too, because I think for a TSO will be appropriate for a lot of these, the completion of these TMDLs, because there are specific projects that people are doing to achieve the TMDLs for most of them. Let's see, what other questions should I be addressing here?
Well, I think on the Malibu bacteria, Evelina brought up the bacteria provisions, and that I wanted to clarify. It sounded like, Evelina, that you were saying that the adoption of the bacteria provisions made tools available that weren't previously available, that you could explore now, that you couldn't explore. And I just want to clarify that all those tools were available before. They've just been sort of collected and put in one place under the new statewide bacteria provisions. You mentioned use of attainability analyses, and that's the one I wrote down. I can't remember the other.
Natural source exclusion.
No, natural source exclusion, which I do think actually we have ongoing study into that in that area. So with what LB said, okay, we're proposing a 5-year extension to the basin plan, so that the TMDL itself would be 5 years longer. But then permittees can also apply for a TSO on top of that. You said you would need at least 10 years to comply with the bacteria TMDL. It sounds like a 5-year extension to the TMDL plus a 5 to 10 year TSO might make that doable. What do you think about that, Evelina? Does that answer your question about that?
I see Evelina is muted. She probably muted herself. Let me see, I just asked her to unmute. There she is.
Thank you. It was an accident. I'm just looking for practical and effective solutions. And like I mentioned, the 5 years is really not enough. We would like to start with the 10. We are happy to discuss some type of interim milestones with you that make you satisfied about sufficient progress on completing ongoing assessments on our design planning and funding, securing funding steps, etc. I'm just looking for something practical, workable, less of a paperwork bureaucracy, but more to basically work on the problem and get the right solution in place and work closely with you on that best solution.
Okay. All right, thanks.
All right, thanks. There's a lot more we could keep discussing, but I think we probably want to let some other people get in with some questions and comments.
Thank you. I really appreciate your listening, and I'm looking forward to our meeting to dive into special study details and then discussing this in more detail. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, for the next speaker, I'd like to call on Greg Shem, and I would ask you to unmute yourself. Thank you.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, very good. Thank you for the presentation. I'm representing the Marina Del Rey Lessees Association, and I also own and operate the boatyard in Marina Del Rey. When I was listening to LB's presentation, as if I understand it correctly, the recommendation for the extension was for a number of factors, but certainly not for achieving a good number of the BMPs. And if I heard you correctly, you said 2.7% of the recommended BMPs were implemented. That's a terribly disheartening number for me, given the Lessees Association, as well as the boatyards, have done a tremendous, at least we thought, amount of progress, including diver certification in conjunction with the County of Los Angeles for underwater bottom cleaning. And I'm referring to the copper TMDL, obviously, directly. The motivation and the addition of numerous clean marina designations by lessees, the switch to almost 100% category 1 low leach rate paints, various outreaches to the community and so on. So we were sitting here, I guess, as an association thinking we were doing pretty good in terms of achieving those BMPs. Is there a way to find out more detail how we are falling short and what's the other 97.3% that we're missing? Because it sounds to me like we're doing a really terrible job. And from the group that we're sitting with, we're thinking we've got most of the low-hanging fruit, and obviously we're working at the boatyard on other alternatives, including non-copper paints and alternative biocide paints and things like that, which may take time. So I appreciate the extension. I think that'll be an important addition, but I'd sure like to know in more detail, and maybe offline, how I can report back to our group on why we're not doing such a great job.
Well, I will say that calculation was based on the Enhanced Watershed Management Program, a plan basically that was put together by the MS4 permittees in Marina Del Rey. And we looked at how many, and they identified, how many projects they needed to do, what kind of projects they needed to do. And we looked at how many projects they had done and how much of the of water was getting treated by those projects. And that's where we came up with that number. So it was for those specific projects. So we can talk offline for more details, but it's from that particular plan, the Enhanced Watershed Management Program.
If I can add on to that, LB, because I do want to have some of this for everyone to hear.
Yeah.
This analysis was focused on MS4 compliance, the stormwater agencies for the area that drains to the harbor, Greg. So for the land in the 2.9 square miles that drains to Marina Del Rey Harbor, those projects, according to what LB said, according to the Enhanced Watershed Management Program, those projects are only 2.7 complete. With the caveat, of course, that doesn't account for the big Oxford Basin project. But what you're concerned about, and all the efforts that you just discussed, were for the boats and for the copper TMDL in the water column, which is the responsibility of and allocated to the boat paint, the boat owners, and the lessees. So it's a separate issue. The schedule for that part of the TMDL is, I think it's 2024. Yeah. So that's like a totally separate schedule and issue. So the analysis that LB presented was just for the MS4 permittees, not the boat owners, the lessees, and the beaches and harbors.
Got it. Well, I appreciate the clarification. But the TMDL extension that you're talking about for metals and toxics, doesn't that apply to that same source?
The extension applies what's proposed in the staff report right now is for the MS4 only. We're not proposing an extension of the allocation to the boats that should be met by 2024. That would be a separate issue.
Do you know specifically the date? Is it going to be the same timing that you're recommending on July 15th, or is that a separate?
Can you say the question again?
Oh, for the TMDL deadline for the copper paints, is that the same? You're saying 2024, is that July 15th, 24?
No, it's March 22nd, 2024.
March 22nd. Okay, got it. Thank you very much for the clarification.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, hi everybody. We're a little behind schedule right now. It is currently 10:31 and we're gonna take a quick 10-minute break and we're gonna start up again at 10:41. So please hang tight and we'll be back shortly. Okay, hi everybody. I hope you're all back. It's 10:41, so we're at the end of our 10-minute break. I see that there's about 11 people left that have questions to be asked. We would like to ask you to please ask your questions one at a time and try to keep your questions to 1 minute per question for the sake of expediency, because we only have roughly 50 minutes left in our meeting. So for the next question, I would like to call on Chris Mitten, and I would like to ask you, please unmute yourself.
Okay, welcome to my basement / Santa's workshop. Okay, so I had two questions. I'll start. My name is Chris Minton. I'm a vice president with Larry Walker Associates, and I was asked to provide some input for the Malibu Creek Watershed EWIMP group, which is comprised of the cities of Agora Hills, Calabasas, Hidden Hills, Westlake Village, as well as the county and flood control district. And like I said, I had two questions. So the first one is actually on the Malibu Creek nutrients TMDL. So in the staff report, and then LB, you mentioned it in your presentation, no schedule extensions are proposed for those TMDLs because of the finding that the exceedances mostly occurred during summer and dry weather. But if you look at the data that's used to develop or is presented in table 29 of the staff report, you actually find that half of those summer exceedances actually occurred during wet weather. There's also a table in your November monitoring data report, table 21, that looks at exceedances of effluent limitations at the outfall, and 100% of those exceedances are wet weather. So while it happens in the summer season, because the summer season extends through November 15th, there are wet weather monitoring events that occur before the end of the summer season, and the data that you presented actually shows wet weather exceedances. So I guess our question is on that one, since there are wet weather exceedances during the summer season, it's not really a dry weather issue. And it seems like, why wouldn't this TMDL also receive a schedule extension since there's wet weather exceedances? So that's my first question.
So I'd say as we looked at it, it looked like the exceedances were distributed over the summer. But if you can show us the data, which days were wet and what proportion are wet, we'd be glad to see that in your comment letter, so we can take a look at it.
Yeah, and I know this one's a little different because it's not a wet and dry TMDL; it's a wet and dry season type situation.
Yeah,
so
it's a little different. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, we'll put that together, and then maybe we could have a quick call to just kind of run through the data. So the other one, sorry, it's a little bit longer of a comment because it's the bigger issue in terms of the schedule extension. So I'm really listening to you all and talking and really reviewing the staff report. It was really unclear to the group and why we wouldn't rely on some of the time estimates that were calculated. They weren't presented today, but they're I think it's in one of the appendices. Those cost estimates that are, the EWIMP cost estimates that those time estimates are based on are took us over a year to develop. It was using modeling per the regional board guidance. We came up with a detailed implementation strategy, and the costs we came up with were based on surveys. So those costs went through multiple reviews and ultimately was approved by the regional board. But there's not really a similar robust analysis to make a finding that the time estimates don't warrant more serious consideration in setting the schedule. We believe those cost estimates are the best available information and are accurate enough to make decisions related to the schedule. But at a minimum, they do give us a good sense of the scale of the work that needs to be done. So for this watershed in table A3 of the staff report, you can see that the magnitude of the effort is on the order of decades, not 5 years. And there's really no meaningful justification to support that we could accomplish all that work in 5 years or even 10 years with a TSO. So, I mean, it does feel like simply said, and it kind of ignores the information that you guys put together. Most of the cities in our group are going to have to implement the largest capital improvement program ever in their communities. And it does feel like this disconnect between what needs to be done and the extension sort of begs the question of, well, why are we doing this? Why are we taking this approach? It seems like the approach that we're taking to determining the schedules this go around kind of repeats some of the mistakes of the past by not fully considering the information we have. And as Chairman has said at last week's hearing, if we look at things through the same lens, we'll get the same result. And what we're asking ultimately is the board to look at things through a different lens because times are different. And in a bad way, times are different because of COVID, but also on the positive side, times are different because we have Measure W, which gives us a new dedicated revenue source primarily for focusing on water quality. We're in a very different situation now than when the TMDL was development. And now that we have a robust EWIMP and a meaningful and relatively stable funding source, we can do a better job setting schedules. And we'd like to take this opportunity to do a better job. Just touching on some stuff that came up during the discussion, I mean, it's sort of conceded that the proposed schedule is unattainable, as it suggests that we can come back to the board in a few years to take yet another regulatory action via TSO. But attaining a TSO, it's uncertain. They do not protect us from third-party lawsuits. And in last week's meeting, a board member expressed that they do not like TSOs, which makes us a little uncomfortable that future boards may not be open to granting them. And relying on those future actions to address an issue we know exists today, that doesn't make a lot of sense to us.
Okay, I think I can. I'll start off, and then I think some other people will jump in.
Well, I just want to kind of lay out kind of what we were hoping to do, and because it might affect
quickly,
how
please, Chris.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
How many years do you want?
So what we're proposing is, yeah, I got to say it the right way, Jenny.
I'm kidding. We took forever.
No, I appreciate it. I know you got a lot going on. So I mean, when we look at it, our request is to extend the schedule to match the staff report where it aligns with Measure W. And that's 30 years based on your analysis. We think by including reopener provisions every 5 years, which aligns with our EWIMP updates, would allow us to reconsider that in light of new information every 5 years. We'll have those interim milestones in the EWIMP, so there's those clear and transparent expectations. But I mean, it's hard to ask for that. We don't take this request lightly, but most of us speaking to you today are scientists, engineers, and planners that make recommendations based on the facts, and that's the facts we have.
I think when you said uncertainty, you were using the right word. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I mean, I think this plays into the alternative. I mean, we feel like the facts say 30 years, but understand that you're balancing a lot of interests. So at a minimum, like we could discuss a 10-year extension with a reopener at 8 years that reconsiders all aspects of the schedule, and we'll do our best in that time frame, and we think we can improve water quality in that time frame with our new dedicated resources. But we want to focus on moving forward, and we do not want to come back in 3 years to ask for certain TSO. We want some certainty so we can focus on projects. Okay, now I'm done. Thank you.
Okay. So, okay. I think I'll start off, and Jenny, I think you'll probably jump in. I think uncertainty is the right word. There's a lot of uncertainty when we're looking at, we're combining both the technical aspects and the cost aspects at the same time. It just, the technical uncertainty and the cost uncertainty sort of add to each other for a great deal of uncertainty. And that's why TSO is useful, because as you start to make more improvements to water quality through more projects, the uncertainty will decrease and the TSO becomes more practical, a more practical tool.
Right. But I don't think there's the level of uncertainty isn't such that we can't see that this is going to take decades. So that's maybe where the balance is in not feeling comfortable with 30 years. But it's really clear that we can't get there in 5 years. I don't think there's any uncertainty around that, simply because even if we had all the money today, we couldn't build all of the projects that are in our EWIMP in 5 years. So that's why I think we need to balance some certainty that 5 years is clearly not enough with the fact that perhaps the Measure W schedule is too far out.
I think LB pointed out, we recognize that 5 years isn't enough if you rely solely on Measure W and the time estimate and the estimates, the project estimates in the EWIMP. So the 5 years is based on the assumption that permittees are going to have to find additional sources of funding, but also that through the adaptive management process and through the revised reasonable assurance analyses, you're going to be revising your watershed management programs. And with new data, recalibrating the model, there's going to be less uncertainty. And we'll see that maybe the magnitude of the projects that were projected to complete, or that, that needed to be completed, might come down. And so that's part of the uncertainty LB's talking about. And what we're talking about here is like plus or minus 5 years, it sounds like we're apart on. So that's pretty good. And it sounds like
again, our request would be, our preference is 30 years. If with all the things you have to balance, if that's not possible, at least 10 years would provide us the opportunity to do some work. Even if we had all of the money, you can't build that, you can't implement that kind of CIP in 5 years. So
right.
Again,
and we're also looking at the fact that this TMDL, are you talking about Malibu Creek watershed bacteria TMDL? That's been in, yeah, I mean, we have to look at the fact that that's been in place since 2006. So it already had a 15-year compliance schedule. So we just need to weigh that. We need to balance too.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah.
In what we recommend.
Yeah, we can't go back. We can only go forward. But I know that weighs on a lot of people that there was some time. But we want to go forward. So
okay.
Thank you for your time, and I'll reach out to talk about the data.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
That sounds good.
Sorry, I was muted. We're going to move on to the next question from Douglas Cross. I would ask that you please unmute your mic.
Good morning, everyone. So my name's Doug Kraus. I'm with the City of Hermosa Beach, the Environmental Programs Manager. Today I'm speaking on behalf of the Beach Cities Watershed Management Group, which includes Hermosa Beach, Redondo Beach, Torrance, Manhattan Beach, and then LA County Flood Control District. I'm asking that the Santa Monica Bay Beaches Bacteria TMDL, the final wet weather deadline for the Beach Cities Group, jurisdictions 5 and 6, be extended the additional 2 years to a full 5 years, extending to July 15th, 2026, to be consistent with the 5-year extensions that the other proposed Santa Monica Bay TMDLs for groups 2 and 3 received, as well as the Bionic Creek TMDL. Our group, of course, has been working hard since day one to meet our TMDLs, address dry weather, early on, and have been working on wet weather projects, and have been implemented a lot in this time. We certainly have been working hard and dedicating funds to this. Manhattan Beach has done an infiltration project. Hermosa Beach did infiltration on the beach. Redondo had a diversion and reuse project in one of their parks. So we've addressed over 250 acres of tributary area with just these smaller projects. More recently, City of Torrance has done a stormwater basin enhancement project, which has addressed 1,400 acres of tributary area. And they are currently underway to increase that for that area to then capture the 85th percentile 24-hour storm volume. We are also, as of a couple months ago, underway on a bunch of Green Street projects, some distributed throughout each of the cities. And of course, working to update our EWIMP to do feasibility studies for new projects.
I'm
Yes.
sorry to interrupt, but I
Sure.
just want to see, we know you've done a lot of good work in the beach cities. I'm wondering if I could focus you on the request for the extension, though. When you want to go from 3 years to 5 years, the reason is something in the staff report wasn't right the way we justified it, or the reason is you want to align for some reason. What's the crux of what you're going for?
Yeah, so I mean, part of it is the alignment with the other, extensions that have been proposed. Also, just, I mean, again, of course, we cannot finish these projects in the amount of time, so the more time, the better. An extra 2 years would help. Partly our original EWIMP, identified projects that have since been, determined to be infeasible. So we are studying now kind of a suite of smaller projects. We don't have a lot of space down there for the one, silver bullet type of project. So we're looking at a suite of smaller projects, which, certainly takes a little more time, a little more effort, a little more money. The coordination of the projects, right? We can't build them all at once. So it's certainly, we could absolutely will need the additional time. We've certainly been working diligently, but could absolutely benefit from that to accomplish at least, an analysis of what it will take, which of these projects in which order and which timeframes can be built to accomplish the goals, and of course, seek funding, in the meantime, right?
Yeah. No, I thank you for your comment. I hear what you're saying. I hope you'll address this particular need in your comment letter to us, so that we can really, see the comment you're making.
No, we absolutely plan on submitting a letter. We thank you for the extension of time on that, and then this calculus of considerations you've put into all of this. So I absolutely appreciative. The 3 years is great. 5 would be just a bit greater. We will absolutely need it and take advantage of it. So yeah, thank you for your time and appreciate it.
Okay, thank you very much.
I'm going to jump in. We have about 30 minutes left, and looks like 9 hands raised. So I will keep my responses short or none at all. But if everyone could keep their questions to like 1 minute, thanks.
Okay, for our next question, that goes to Mark Johnson. I would like to ask you to please unmute your mic.
Yes, good morning. My name is Mark Johnson. I work for the City of Malibu, which is part of the North Santa Monica Bay Coastal Watershed EWIMP Group. The City of Malibu is a small 21-mile coastal community that faces a unique set of challenges as a result of its location and characteristics. Despite these challenges, the City of Malibu has long been a strong advocate for environmental protection. The city has completed a significant amount of work in developing and implementing effective water quality improvement projects. In 2010, the city completed Malibu Legacy Park, an award-winning multi-benefit clean water project that can treat up to 2.6 million gallons of stormwater and urban water runoff per day. Legacy Park and Civic Center Stormwater Treatment Facility can capture and treat the 85th percentile 24-hour storm event. The city has completed multiple other water quality improvement projects, including the Paradise Cove Stormwater Treatment Facility and Wildlife Road biofilters. The city has also adopted notable local laws aimed at reducing marine debris. We are constantly meeting the single sample dry weather bacteria TMDL targets, as well as our wet weather interim TMDL targets. Water quality has improved since the TMDL was adopted. The city is proud of these successes, but a number of projects still need to be completed to reach the final TMDL targets. The city's process for planning and constructing projects is in line with the staff report estimate of 5 to 7 years. As such, even if the city had all the funding it needed to develop the remaining infrastructure projects, which we do not, the schedule extension provided would still be insufficient. The Safe Clean Water Program funds will provide much needed assistance in completing the remaining projects. While the city has not yet received the first disbursement of our municipal funds, we have allocated approximately $275,000 towards the construction of the Marie Canyon Green Street projects and $100,000 towards operation and maintenance of Legacy Park and Paradise Cove's treatment facility. Future funding of regional projects is an issue for the city, as we have limited ability to meet the water supply scoring criteria. As it stands, there still is a sizable funding gap for developing future projects. This need has to be put in context with the fact that the city has endured not one, but two natural disasters in the past 2 years. The city was still recovering.
Mark, I'm really sorry I have to interrupt you because we're running out of time. We've recommended a 3-year extension for the city of Malibu, and the calculation based on the availability of Measure W was 6 years. Are you recommending 6 years instead of 3?
Well, we're recommending closer to 10 years because, for instance, that we like the amount of money we get from Measure W is not going to be enough to fund these projects. If you take into consideration what the municipal funds allows us, it's going to take approximately 10 years to be able to build the remaining projects identified in our ELIP.
Okay, well, our calculus showed like 6 years. So maybe that's something we can talk about when we get the details of your letter.
Yes, I will.
So you're requesting 10 years, I guess.
Somewhere around there. We haven't quite decided what we're going to request in our comment letter, but it's going to be closer to 10 years.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, our next question comes from Shahram Karagani. I would like to ask you, please unmute your mic.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good morning, LB. Good morning, Vice Chair Yee, board member staff, water board staff. Thank you very much for the process to consider TMDL schedule extension. I'll make it very quick to stay within Jenny's time right now. The city of Los Angeles, we have done a lot. We have done more than 50 projects using Proposition O. So as a result of that, we have a lot of experience, and in order for me to stay consistent with what I have mentioned to in the past, I'm asking for a 10-year CIP implementation for our Bionic Creek for the same reason that I had given you in the past, but just to mention them very briefly, it takes time for us to update our computer modelings. It takes time for SECO documentation, permitting, to make sure that the Measure W and also other sorts of funding, MOAs and MOUs have been executed right now. 3 to 7 years may be proper for the projects that we have already designed and funded, but to start from concept report, it takes more than 3 to 7 years. I don't need an answer right now. I would put all of this in a comment letter and we could talk offline, but that's pretty much what I'm asking. Thank you.
Thank you, Shahram.
Okay, so we're going to move on to the next question from Arthur Pugsley. I would like to ask you, please unmute your mic.
Thank you. I'm just going to keep it really quick. I had a couple of questions. I'm speaking today on behalf of Waterkeeper, Heal the Bay, and NRDC. We plan on submitting written comments. But one of the questions that, first, I'd like to thank you for the extra week. That was very helpful, and for doing the presentation today. The main question I have is the staff report intended to be a CEQA document, or will there be a CEQA document to accompany the proposed changes, since they appear to be projects? Yeah, let's see. The other questions are more in the form of comments. So rather than subjecting you to comments phrased as questions, I'll wait and hold off until we submit our comments. But rest assured, we're not, we're glad that the staff report is not recommending 10-year across the board extensions. We think those are just completely unjustified. And in fact, we think it's too generous as it is in the staff report, but you can imagine that and you'll get, you'll get comments to that effect. But mostly I had questions about the CEQA aspects and how the modified deadlines will interact with any site-specific objectives. I know the copper in Marina del Rey Harbor is one potential, and if there's others and that this sets some sort of precedent for the future, there may be others in areas with site-specific objectives, and whether that has any bearing on this. Also, I think the report should clarify that Measure W funds are not intended to be the only, they're not intended to be the universe of funds. It seems to be sort of, from the past few workshops, it seems to be, we seem to be slipping into a mindset that if you don't get funding through Measure W, you can't do it. And it's infeasible because there's no money, but that's not what Measure W was intended to do. And one last question is, how have other extensions been handled, and how does this process compare with those?
Okay.
So those are my only questions at this point.
I think, thank you. I would say in terms of the CEQA, if you look at the tentative resolution that we published, that we noticed, that has some discussion on the CEQA and why we think this doesn't require an additional CEQA analysis, because all we're doing is changing the end dates basically, and not changing the methods of compliance or any of the reasonably foreseeable environmental impacts of those methods of compliance. So I'll turn you there for the CEQA question. Let's see. We agree that Measure W is not the world of funds. I think we make that pretty clear in the staff report, but I can go back and take another look at that to see if it looks like we've haven't made that clear. We do say pretty repeatedly that, you know, we understand that Measure W is not enough for these particular permittees in this watershed to fund all their projects, but they'll have time to look for more funding and so forth. I'm not sure I understood your question about how the site-specific.
I think it's more for probably less where there's less variation, like in a marine water. But if you expand these to others, and there is like a site-specific TMDL modification, say, based on a water effect ratio, how are you going to account for changes in the water effect ratio over the course of the extension, was the question. I guess it might be more theoretical for a future one, but it's probably something that needs to be at least thought of.
Okay. Well, we'll probably have to talk offline because I'm still not quite sure I understand, but we'll definitely. Yeah.
We'll talk offline. No, I think I know what you're talking about, Arthur.
I figured you would.
Jenny will explain to me, and then we'll.
But it's not related to this project right now.
Yeah, it was just more of a general concern that I wanted to just get out there.
And okay. I think your last question was about how does this compare to other extensions that we've done? We've done plenty of other TMDL reconsiderations. I think we've only, any of the TMDL staff can jump in and correct me if I'm wrong. The only extension I think we've done was the one in Marina del Rey, where we added waste load allocations for the front basins and we extended the back basins by a little one, by 2 years. I think that's the only other extension we've done. Yeah, but there, you know, we've done a lot of TMDLs with long implementation periods. So
we've done an extension for Santa Clara River Chloride.
Oh,
but then we took it back again, and then we extended again. Arthur, that was the.
Oh, okay.
That was that's the other one I could think of.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Thank you again for doing this. I appreciate the time to ask questions. So.
Okay, our next question comes from Paul Alva, and I would like to ask that you please unmute your mic.
Good morning. For the record, I'm Paul Alva with the Los Angeles County Public Works. I'm going to be keeping my comments to be very brief. First, I want to thank the Regional Board staff for proposing these basin plan amendments for extending the final TMDLs for the near-term TMDLs, a final deadline for the near-term TMDLs. These extensions are extremely important. While we acknowledge the board's commitment to achieve water quality objectives in as little time as possible, we are very concerned with the short timelines that are currently proposed. As discussed in today's staff presentation, the extensions vary. For example, there is no extension for the Malibu Creek TMDL, a 3-year extension for the Marina Del Rey Toxics TMDL, and a 5-year extension for the various Bionic Creek TMDLs. As was shared last Thursday and mentioned earlier today, the Safe Clean Water program is progressing extremely well, including awarding hundreds of millions of dollars in municipal and regional funds towards improving water quality in the region. The program is already leveraging hundreds of millions of additional dollars from other sources and will continue to do so in perpetuity. Although permittees have already constructed a number of stormwater quality projects and many more are on the way, permittees remain constrained by the amount and timing of funding and the feasibility of project planning, design, and construction schedules. As such, the county believes that a strong case can be made for deadline extensions beyond the 5 years. But for today, I want to emphasize the critical need for the Marina Del Rey TMDL and the Malibu Creek TMDL, nutrients TMDL, to be extended 5 years to be consistent with the other TMDL extensions. We will be providing more detailed written comments to support our request. Thank you very much for this opportunity to comment.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you. So our next question comes from David Waba. I would like to ask that you please unmute your mic.
There we go. Yeah, good morning, everybody. I'll also try to keep this brief. I'm David Waba. I'm the Director of Community Development and Public Works for the City of Rolling Hills Estates. We also have Kathleen McGowan here with us today, and would like to have her have the opportunity to speak if ideally right after me would be great. But I would just say that on behalf of the Palos Verdes Peninsula Watershed Management Group, which includes the cities of Rolling Hills Estates, Rolling Hills, Rancho Palos Verdes, and Palos Verdes Estates, and LA County, we are also asking that the Machado Lake TMDLs, both the nutrient and pesticide and PCBs TMDLs, be included in this basin plan amendment, and that the final deadlines for each TMDL be extended for at least 5 years until July 15th, 2026, 2026, I should say. So that's essentially what I wanted to hit that point home, and we're also going to be submitting a comment letter as well. So I have a number of other points I can read, but I think in the interest of time, that's the main point that I wanted to make, that we are looking for a 5-year extension. So then, like I said, if Kathleen can be given the opportunity to speak next, that would be great.
Thank you, David. I think she is next on the list. Is that right, ma'am?
Yes.
Great. Thank you again, David.
So our next question comes from Kathleen McGowan. I would like to ask that you please unmute your mic.
Good morning. Thank you. I'm also speaking on behalf of the Palos Verdes Peninsula Watershed Management Group. And as David indicated, the group is asking for a 5-year extension of both TMDLs, both the Machado Lake Nutrient TMDL and the Pesticides and PCBs TMDL. We'll just make a couple of points, and then we'll put most of our details in a comment letter. Neither TMDL is a dry weather TMDL. The nutrient TMDL waste load allocations are based on average annual stormwater runoff to the lake. And the pesticides and PCBs TMDL waste load allocations are based on meeting storm-borne sediment pollutant concentrations in the discharge. We'll be reporting on progress made, which has been significant on implementing the TMDL, but the group is facing significant challenges given the implementation schedules for these TMDLs that are much shorter than comparable TMDLs in other watersheds. The nutrient TMDL schedule was 9.5 years for Machado Lake, whereas according to the staff report, Santa Clara nutrient schedule was originally 15 years and Malibu Creek nutrients TMDL was 19 years. The Machado Lake pesticide and PCB implementation schedule was only 7.5 years, whereas the LA Harbor Toxics is 20 years and Bionic Creek estuary toxics was 15 years for the same legacy pesticides. Marina Del Rey Back Basin's toxins was also given a short implementation period of 6 years. And like the Machado Lake TMDLs is past due and is being proposed for additional time in this basin plan amendment. So just in summary, the Peninsula Group has made progress. We've completed 2 full capture regional projects and have identified alternative downstream projects and secured safe clean water funding for design and planning, design of one, planning of another. And a schedule extension of 5 years is appropriate given the need for collaboration on downstream projects, the challenges of the pandemic, and competing demands for safe clean water funding. That's all I have. Thank you very much for allowing us to provide our input.
Thank you, Kathleen.
Okay, so our next question comes from John Hunter. I would like to please ask that you unmute your mic.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, thank you very much. Yes, I'm John Hunter, and I'm going to be speaking for the Lower San Gabriel and Lower Los Angeles River watershed groups, and I'm going to be very, very brief on this. Basically, first, I want to thank the board for looking into these extensions. That is extremely encouraging. And I'm going to limit my comments to the final deadlines that are coming up in the near future for LA River and San Gabriel. We've been talking this morning at a very, very high level about the TMDLs, but something I want to bring to everyone's attention is there are a finite number of contractors, qualified contractors in the area. And I mean, when you look at the number of projects that are going to be going in Ventura County and LA County, the competition between watershed groups is going to be fierce for qualified contractors. And unless Caltrans decides to stop their freeway construction, we may run into a real bottleneck just getting our hands dirty with the contractors digging the dirt. So that's something that's really got to be in effect. Also, keeping my comments very briefly, our RAAs were completed 5 years ago, and they're already out of date. The TMDLs were developed about 15 years ago, and they're using the same basic watershed modeling that was done. The modeling has really improved since then. We do have Safe Clean Water funding for scientific studies, and it may not be a bad idea to look into working collaboratively on the scientific funding to see if we can recalibrate the TMDLs to the new standards. And I know the basin plan amendments. I say 2026, 2028. That's right around the corner for us. And I'd really like to start working with the regional board to look for extensions for those TMDLs, because we will not be able to get the projects that we need in the ground by then. It's just not going to be feasible. So that's all I'm going to say. I would like to work with the board, within the next 12 to 18 months to get started on this process. So that's it in the interest of time. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to speak, and thank you for holding the workshop.
Thank you, John. And about the contractors, if that's not something that we incorporate in our considerations when we were doing these. So if you have specific information that you can share in your comment letter, we'd appreciate that.
I will. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so our next comment comes from Arn Elsom. I'd like to please ask that you unmute your mic.
Hello, Jenny, LB, Vice Chair Yee, Arnie Anselm, representing the Ventura County permittees. You've heard a lot on the challenges of design, permitting, and building TMPs and TMDLs, because we've learned a lot since TMDLs were first developed. And the TMDL schedules need to be realistic about the amount of time it takes to implement these large-scale capital improvement projects. And our main concern in Ventura is wet weather bacteria, because it's not solvable in short time frames. And it's important to understand the relationship between the permit and the schedules in the TMDLs. If we don't have more time for TMDLs with past due or upcoming deadlines, the planning process for the permit will not be effective. If we have schedules that we know are not attainable, even if we had all the funding we need, we can't put together a watershed management plan we can implement. As a result, the combination of the permit conditions and the lack of adjustments to schedules are setting us up for failure. The TMDL schedules will drive a watershed management planning process that cannot realistically be implemented. That's our problem. Watershed management plans that can't be realistically implemented. I'm not seeing success in our request for extensions or in the reality of meeting wet weather bacteria in the deadlines we have. So what's the outcome from that? We're going to face fines, penalties, third-party lawsuits, spend time and resources on those issues that don't improve water quality, and ultimately end up with a compliance plan, which is going to look very much like a TMDL implementation plan or a watershed management plan with due dates and milestones. So why can't we jump to that planning endpoint through TMDL extensions? That's my question. And our big concern is watershed management plans that can't realistically be implemented.
Wet weather bacteria in particular and watershed management plans that you'll develop, but you won't think will be able to be implemented.
Mm-hmm.
So your question is, why are we recommending a combination of basin plan amendments and TSOs and not just basin plan amendments with the TMDL extension?
We didn't get a lot of our requested TMDLs extended. So
why didn't, okay, so first let's start with that. So I believe the ones you requested extensions for were ones in the Cayugas Creek watershed, Kitty Beach and Hobie Beach, and Malibu. And so for the Cayugas Creek watershed ones, we didn't consider those because they weren't coming up right away. We focused this effort, because we have limited resources, on just the ones that are coming up in the next 1 to 3 years. And then we did look at the ones in Malibu as you requested, but we did not look at Kitty and Hobie Beach for the reason LB explained before. The deadline had already passed. But Ewelina brought that up, and I understand LB, we're having a meeting with Ventura County early in January to talk more about Kitty and Hobie Beach. Were there other ones that we missed?
Well, it's really the wet weather bacteria. And even if we had the money, you've heard from LA parties with Measure W money, they can't meet their schedules. We don't even have that. If we had all that money, if we had a no match grant, we couldn't spend it fast enough to get these projects in place with the design and permitting and,
okay.
Dealing
the
with
only wet weather bacteria TMDLs in Ventura County are Malibu bacteria, Katy Beach and Hobie Beach, and Santa Clara River bacteria wet weather, which has I think a deadline even farther out. Are you just talking about wet weather bacteria in general, not
yes,
necessarily?
And how are they
not a TMDL extension
management plans, and how are they going?
Okay.
How can we commit to a watershed management plan that we know we can't fund and can be successful with the deadlines we're given?
Okay. So LB, I think for that one, we should talk offline, because what you said before, like, I don't want to get it run afoul of any noticing requirements where we talk about MS4 requirements that aren't related to just the TMDL. If you want to talk about TMDL deadline extensions, I think we probably could, but so for Santa Clara bacteria TMDL, Kitty and Hobie Beach, or Malibu bacteria TMDL.
Well, can you answer the question on what happens when we're out of compliance?
With those?
Yeah. Out of compliance with your MS4 permit.
Right.
Well, I would want to chime in. Hi, everybody. This is Renee. I think that this is a good conversation for us to have offline, Arnie, because we are getting into, when you talk about being out of compliance, you're out of compliance with regard to your permit. And this, as we noted, LB noted at the beginning of this workshop, we're really focusing on the TMDL extensions through the basin plan amendment process here.
Okay.
So I think it would be good to try to keep our conversation focused on that. for the time being. But I understand your concern, and I think it would be a good idea for us to, you know, have a meeting between yourself and Jenny and LB and myself after this workshop, and we can talk to you more about that.
Thank you, Renee.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Renee.
Okay, thank you, Arnie.
Okay, we have one last question from Richard Watson. I please ask that you unmute your mic.
It's unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I want to talk about just one thing, and that's future TMDL extensions. And I've got 2 or 3 related questions. One, I'd ask you to take a look at what the comments I made in my December 6th letter and the testimony I did on the 10th. And specifically, what I've suggested is 2 more basin plan amendments. One would be for the 3 years, 2024, 25, and 26, and then followed after that with another one for 27, 28, and 29. The reason for this is particularly the metals TMDLs have a real problem. And we've got some measures in place that are not being necessarily considered. One of which is you've agreed already to move forward with a basin plan amendment to address the biotic ligand model for copper and to consider perhaps doing the same thing for zinc. In those cases, I think that would tend to change the numbers in the TMDLs. And so we really ask you to commit to doing those future things. I think you had a slide on earlier, the question mark. I particularly ask you to commit to the 2024, 25, 26, because those are, John Hunter mentioned the lower San Gabriel River in 2026. That's the same final deadline as the Los Cerritos Channel. And I was involved in negotiating that implementation plan that you kindly did for us, since these are EPA established TMDLs. One last comment. You did establish quite a procedure, I think, in the staff report that you've just been talking about. And I think because of the procedures you did there, I think you're in a position to move forward to do additional basin plan amendments. And I would request a commitment to move forward for at least the next 3 years. Thank you.
So you're referring to our criteria and how we went through them as the...
Yes, the criteria and just the procedures that you set up in that system. Related to that, one of the things might help the rest of us for the future is if you might take some of that information and put it together in a little fact sheet and make it available to us for what would help you be able to move ahead faster. What information do you need from us? Because I think we've got a lot of that information for you, and particularly in the Los Cerritos Channel, we've, as you know, been able to spend a fair amount of money. We've got 4 projects either completed or under construction, a 5th one, and these are major projects. So we're talking, you know, tens of millions of dollars. So we've done a lot, plus the cities have done a lot independently. So let us know what information you need, and we'd ask you to commit to move forward with 5-year extensions for a number of the metals TMDLs. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That's our last, that's our last question?
Yes, it doesn't look like we have any other questions.
Man, you're like perfect on time. Well, let me just take, to wrap up by saying thank you again to everybody and apologizing for rushing some people. I know you had things you really wanted to share with us, and we did kind of rush some of you in order to be able to get to everybody. So I apologize, and I thank you for letting yourselves be a little rushed. Here's our final comment due date is January 11th in 2021. And the board meeting will be February 11th, 2021. And I'll just end with, an invitation. We are going to follow up with some of you. We've already said that, but if anybody else wants to follow up and meet with staff, we'd be very glad to do that. Thank you. And I think with that, we're going to end the meeting in just right now. Thank you all, and we'll be in touch. Thanks.
Thanks,
everybody. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, I assume Man can end the meeting.
Yes. Do you want me to go ahead and end it?
Yeah.
Okay.